This is a message for Barack Obama from an old white guy. You're not a dope. You've studied history. You ought to know we've been through an economic revolution over the past quarter century. Class warfare, but definitely not the kind conservatives rant about. The very rich declared war on all the rest of us, and they've won practically every battle so far. Their weapon is money and all the political power money buys, and you know what? You may be our last hope. You should know that the widening gap between rich and poor didn't happen by accident. It was a result of policy decisions by both Republicans and Democrats who depend on the very rich to buy them a fresh term of office every 2 or 4 or 6 years. The revolution started with 3 major initiatives back when Ronald Reagan was president. One was an attack on government regulation of business and industry. Okay, some government regulation was a little heavy-handed back then, but it was there to protect us from corporate abuse and from the wild economic swings that once destroyed the financial security of so many families. The second initiative was an all-out attack on organized labor, with government aggressively helping big business break the power of unions. It got harder and harder to negotiate decent pay, benefits, or working conditions, and the political strength working people won by sticking together in unions disappeared, along with most of the good jobs. The third initiative was a rewriting of the tax code, done with the full support of a Democratic Congress. They called it tax simplification back then, but filing a tax return wasn't any simpler. There just were fewer tax categories, with the top tax rates cut by nearly 2/3 and fewer deductions for the middle class. That was the first great giveaway to the very rich. I won't go into so-called free trade right now, except to note that the jobs most likely to leave the country were the union jobs. By the turn of the millennium, the only unions still growing represented workers in the public sector. But that's over now. The solution was contracting out jobs that used to be done by government employees. It got in gear under the first Bush and continued under Bill Clinton with a lot of encouragement by Al Gore. The private sector, we were told, was just so much more efficient. And the civil servant was just a lazy, gold-breaking slug. Outsourcing made so much sense until it happened. True, the new privately employed contract workers earned a lot less than the old government workers, and they didn't get nearly as much in the way of benefits. It should have been much cheaper. But for some strange reason, it wasn't. For some strange reason, it wound up costing more. Oh, right, I forgot to figure in those corporate profits, didn't I? The current Bush-Cheney administration perfected the process in Iraq, where a pack of fat and happy private contractors charged top dollar to cater meals, service porta parties, guard State Department officials, torture prisoners, and on and on. Oh, and let's not forget the original war profiteers who get to continuously replace all the expensive hardware that keeps exploding out there. But what makes it all a really sweet racket is that it's all done on credit. The government borrows the money and funnels it right into corporate pockets. The public doesn't feel the pinch because the bill won't come due until Bush is back in Crawford playing with his chainsaw. To make it even sweeter for the well-connected, over half the contracts are no bid. So much for the capitalist miracle of competition. Lots of those contracts are cost plus, where the more money a contractor spends, the bigger his profit. It has a way of getting, well, sort of expensive. In short, we're being looted. Tax cuts for the rich, wage losses and inflation for the middle class, and big chunks cut out of the social safety net that was supposed to provide some security for the poor. Our government, which is supposed to represent our interests, is selling our future piece by piece to politically connected profiteers. The Bushies don't mind that our kids and our grandkids are left with the bill. So what are you going to do about it, Barack? Greed gone wild brought us the subprime mortgage crisis, the credit crisis, the liquidity crisis, the crisis, you name it. Bankruptcies and business failures and job losses don't matter to the very rich because they're, well, very rich. They measure a person's worth in dollars. Well, maybe euros now that they've shoved the dollar into the toilet and double flushed. The only ray of sunshine is that the free market ideologues are momentarily in retreat. A window of opportunity is open, so there's a chance for Democrats to show some backbone and push back against the culture of greed, not by placating us with a little fast cash and a so-called stimulus package, but by enacting the structural changes we need to undo the damage that started in the Reagan years. We need at least 2 higher tax brackets to start getting back some of the money looted by the super rich. For starters, we can reinstitute the 39.6% marginal rate that helped balance the budget in the 90s. We need to eliminate the cap on FICA liability, not just raise it a little. How can you justify a truck driver paying over 6% of his salary on Social Security taxes while a corporate CEO who earns 100 times as much pays 0.1%? We have to stop outsourcing our health and our safety and our national defense. The myth of the private sector being more efficient is just that, a myth. And anybody who's been paying attention knows it by now. Outsourcing just encourages cronyism and corruption. We can't afford to go to war just so Halliburton and Blackwater and Bechtel and Lockheed Martin can line the pockets of their shareholders. It ought to be clear by now that the only reason we went to war in Iraq was so war profiteers could loot the treasury. And if we're going to give the middle class and the poor a chance to start getting ahead again, we need a government that supports a worker's right to join a labor union and a union's right to organize, even where it's unwelcome. Once upon a time, we expected kids to do better than their parents, and they did. Ordinary working people bought their own homes and put their kids through college, thanks to solid union jobs and benefits. These days, though, most of the kids who still graduate college have to dig themselves out from under mountains of debt. So yes, it's time for change, but it has to be real change. Forget all those piddling little programs that only distract us from the big problems, and definitely forget about reaching across the aisle to a Republican Party that's owned lock, stock, and barrel by the plutocrats. We need action, Barack, the kind of action we got from an earlier generation of Democrats. And if we old white guys don't especially respond to your message of hope, it's because we've heard it all before dozens of times, and all we seem to get is disappointment. So if you're going to channel a dead president, Barack, forget about JFK and work on FDR. We need another New Deal, a new deal, so we can take back what we lost to the Reaganauts and the Bushies and all their plutocrat friends. I don't know if American government ever really was of the people or by the people, but I'm old enough to remember a time when it was at least for the people. And if we can't make it for the people again, Barack, all your hope and all your inspiration is just a load of crap.